Okay, this is Dr. Kraus with one more Raspberry Pi getting started video. I had a student ask me how he could configure Raspberry Pi without a keyboard. It turns out that all of the recent computer purchases in their house have been laptops, and so they didn't actually have any USB keyboards laying around. And so the answer to that question is the same as a different question I tried to ask previously, which was how to configure Raspberry Pi without an HDMI monitor if you don't have one of those lying around. Now, probably everybody has an HDMI TV, most people anyway, and so you can just plug your Raspberry Pi directly into your TV. So maybe the missing keyboard question is a bigger question. Either way, it's the same solution. I want to use just a laptop to configure Raspberry Pi. So step one is to plug the Raspberry Pi wired Ethernet connection directly into your home router. And then you have to know how to go to your home router's IP address, which in my case is a 192.168.0.1, which is relatively common for some brands of routers. And then once you're logged into the admin page of the router, to know how to get to the DHCP client list and to find the Raspberry Pi. And because it's the wired connection, its MAC address will begin with the letter B, 8-27. And so I know that this right here, 192.168.0.120, is the IP address of the Raspberry Pi that I'm trying to log into. We're going to ultimately need two tools. One of those is PuTTY. PuTTY is an SSH client for Windows. You actually download it directly as an exe file, so you do not necessarily need to install it per se. You just download it and put it somewhere. And so if I click here and go to download PuTTY, it would bring up an exe file, which is not an installer. It is just literally the exe file that I would run. So I'm going to scroll down here to putty.exe, and if I just click that and save it to my desktop or to some folder that I'm used to saving my files in, just so I know where that is. And so I already have that on my desktop, so I'm not going to save it. And then when I double click it here on my desktop, it should pull up a little configuration window and ask me what IP address I'm trying to connect to. My computer is being slow and annoying. So yeah, some kind of PuTTY configuration window. And so I would type in here the IP address that I just looked up for my Raspberry Pi and accept all the rest of the defaults and hit open. I should pull up, and it's going to ask me the first time if I trust this SSH key on the Raspberry Pi, and I'm going to say yes. And then you log in with username Pi, P-I, and password Raspberry, R-A-S-P-B-E-R-Y. And now I'm logged into the Raspberry Pi and I'm ready to go. We're going to follow the tutorial that is listed on Adafruit. I think if you Googled Adafruit VNC Raspberry Pi, it would take you to this page, which is the learn.adafruit.com raspberry-pi- Adafruit-raspberry-pi lesson-7 remote control, blah, blah, blah. We're trying to get the Raspberry Pi into a state where you would plug it in without anything attached to it except the power supply, and it would turn on, connect to your home Wi-Fi, and automatically start a VNC viewer. In order to do that, we're also going to need a VNC client. So if you were to Google real VNC and click download, that ought to take you to here and ask you your platform, and I think we just need the personal edition. I just need the viewer. Okay. So if I want to download VNC Viewer for Windows, I can do that as either an exe or a zip file in 32 or 64-bit. Pretty sure Windows 7 is 64-bit, and so download the VNC Viewer for Windows, save and install that when the time comes, which we don't need right now. So we're SSH'd into the Raspberry Pi, and we could then get it to start the VNC viewer, and we could just work in it, or we could continue just working in the SSH window for now. So I'm going to come over here and copy. So the code, the first thing it does is have you update all of the packages on the package manager on your Raspberry Pi. So sudo apt-get update. I just click this little copy link and paste it in there. So it's doing that, and then it's going to install the VNC server. So the server runs on the Raspberry Pi, the client or viewer runs on your computer. And so the Raspberry Pi is doing those things. And now it's going to actually install the server. So first it updated, now it's installing the server, and I'm just hitting return to accept the defaults, and it's going to install the VNC server. And then if you follow this through step by step, I think you'll start the server once just to kind of test it out. So while that's happening, I'm going to install the VNC viewer. So that I can log in. And so when this is ready, okay, so I'm going to copy this code and right click to paste it over here, and then not the same password as logging into your Raspberry Pi itself. This is a password for accessing the desktop. So it says that it started that on :1. So if I came over here and said 192.168.0.120:1, that ought to work. It'll give me a warning that this is an insecure VNC connection, and then it needs to know that password that I just created for the VNC viewer. And so now this is the VNC desktop of my Raspberry Pi. The only problem is that it's not going to automatically start every time, which is what we want to do eventually. So we have VNC working. I could now do things on the Raspberry Pi from my laptop, but only if I first log into SSH and start it. So we want to make it auto start the VNC, and that is what we do in the next step. So this walks you through what I just did about how to access via VNC. And like I said, the main thing now, so there's this warning here that this will only work if your Pi is set up to automatically log into the desktop environment. That is no longer relevant as of Jessie, because Raspbian Jessie automatically goes to the desktop environment, so you don't have to do anything there to configure that. So we want to create this .config auto start folders underneath the startup directory. So if I said CD, I'm in my home directory. I can verify that by typing pwd, which is print working directory. So there should be a .config, and I just typed cd.con, and then I hit tab, and the tab completion took over. And so that's there. And I typed ls to see what's in it. So I'm going to type make dir auto start, and then go into that folder. And so that's where we're at here. And then I'm going to create this file. So Nano is a lightweight text editor. I'm going to create this file called typevnc.desktop. So I'm going to copy that code and right click it here. That's not cool. Why are you being funny? So nano typevnc.desktop. Okay, for some reason you did not like me copying and pasting that command. I don't know why. I'm going to copy this code and paste it here. And then I think he talks about this, but to close out of Nano, you hit Control X and then Y and then enter. So Control X is to exit, and then it asks you if you want to save the buffer, and you say Y for yes, and then it gives you a default name, which is the name we gave it when we started, and so we hit enter. And so now if I set ls, there's typevnc.desktop in the auto start. And that should be all that it takes. And the next time I restart the Pi, it should automatically start the VNC viewer. So I'm going to shut this thing down and have it restart and see if the VNC server starts without me having to log in over SSH. So my Raspberry Pi is actually upstairs rebooting. I can't actually see it. But what I'm going to do is open up PowerShell and see if I can ping it. And when I'm done pinging it, I'll know that it's connected to my home network. Still wired. We'll log in later and do the wireless configuration. 92.168.0.120. When I get a response, I know that the Raspberry Pi has rebooted. Now I can restart my VNC server. That makes it look like it's not been installed. It's just running. Okay, whatever. So it's same stuff as before. Connect. Give it the desktop password, and you always get this error message, and I don't know why, and I haven't figured out how to make that go away. So just, it's annoying, but we're there. So we're up, we're running, and everything is good. And now, if I wanted to connect to Wi-Fi, all I would have to do is be to find my own home network, type in the key, and everything should just work. And then I could unplug the wired Ethernet and reboot it again and see if it automatically connects to the Wi-Fi and automatically starts the VNC viewer, and then I'm ready to use it without ever needing a mouse or keyboard or monitor. Thanks. Let me know if you have questions.